Item number 7.1, the city manager. Mr. Beener, we will step out. Apologize for that. Okay, Mr. Butler, we have a staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor Molina, Mayor, and members of the council. Tonight we're asking the council to consider a request for funding that we have received recently from Helping Others Sleep Tonight, which is known as HOST, and this would be for the acquisition of the former location of Foothill Manor, and it's located at 405 South 4th Street. You have a written staff report that I put together and then some materials that Dennis McCord of HOST provided. I'm not going to go into a lot of background about HOST itself because I believe Mr. McCord is prepared to speak tonight. We'll give you kind of the rundown on that organization and a little bit about their history. We've met with them several times over the past few months in regard to this specific property, and they've made it clear that they would like the city to be a financial partner, if possible, in the acquisition and rehabilitation of the property. And so we're kind of at a point where we need to get some direction from the council on whether you're comfortable with that and what some of the issues are in terms of getting to a point of making that decision. So that's the purpose of being here tonight. My written report included just a discussion of a few issues that will need to be discussed and decided, if not tonight, then in the weeks ahead. The first has to do with zoning issues. And one of my least favorite things that city staff people do sometimes is read their staff reports word for word, but I'm going to do that for just 2 short paragraphs here just to make sure that I state this clearly. Joel Andrews is not with us tonight, and he actually put this wording together. Our Deputy City Attorney, Mr. White, has also been real involved in looking at the legal aspects of all this, so he may want to chime in. But currently, that property, 405 South 4th, is located in what we call our heavy industrial zone, and currently this zone does not allow for shelters as proposed. But there are a couple of things that could allow us to get around that issue. The first is that the applicant has submitted a planned development application to allow the existing structure to be converted to an emergency or transitional shelter. And this application would first go to the Planning Commission for a recommendation, followed by a determination by the City Council. And then at the same time that application is being processed, City staff is also preparing an ordinance to conform with Senate Bill 2. Senate Bill 2 was state legislation that requires that the city provide, and this is not just Patterson, every city in California, provide at least one zoning designation where emergency shelters are allowed without discretionary approval. The city may incorporate objective development and management standards for the operation of the shelter, but such standards must not be onerous. Consistent with the plan approved in the housing element, the draft ordinance would allow shelters without discretionary approval in the light industrial and the heavy industrial zones. Pending review and approval by the Planning Commission and the City Council, the ordinance would make the plan development application unnecessary and would allow the project to move forward at this site. So there are some zoning issues that we kind of would need to work through, but they're not necessarily an absolute barrier at this point, pending these other actions that are in the works. Funding issues are obviously important because that's really the request you have before you tonight. Obviously, the council could, within its discretion, allocate general fund dollars. There's no legal reason you could not do that. The other interesting option that we would have, you may remember that during the housing boom, the city established what was called an affordable in lieu housing fee. There's still some funds available, actually in excess of the amount that HOST is requesting. There is some legal debate that we would need to resolve about whether this kind of a facility would be eligible for those dollars. It's one that you could argue either way, but that would be a non-general fund source that could be available for this kind of a project. I talk in the there's actually in the written report too, there's some discussion about CDBG and emergency shelter grant funds. So there are some federal monies out there that could be available. The report goes into some detail on the timelines for all that, the annual process, and I don't necessarily want to get into all that tonight, but that's a potential funding source as well. Rehabilitation costs and accessibility issues. I mentioned a paragraph or two in the report about that. I know that Chief Hall and our building official, Jim Swanson, did a courtesy walkthrough of the property with Dennis McCord on Monday of this week, and they have some feedback that they've written up, and I don't know for sure if Mr. McCord's received it yet or not, but he's nodding that he has. So he's got a list that has to do with building safety issues, fire safety issues, and accessibility issues. One thing to note is that if there was public money involved in the acquisition or the rehabilitation, we would definitely have to comply with the new updated accessibility standards. And then I mentioned a paragraph on legal liability issues. We would want to have real thorough analysis from not only our city attorneys, but our risk management authority in terms of, once it's clear what the city's role in this project is going to be, what are the liability issues associated with a facility of this type. And then I made one little pitch during the last part of the staff report about, I think it would be very important and wise for Host to have a larger partner agency involved in this project if it's going to move forward. I've had a chance to meet and interact with a lot of the Host members, and I don't question their passion, their skill, their knowledge at all. But I think that because they're such a young organization, and I mentioned a couple times in the staff report that I don't think as of yet they have a 501c3. They haven't gone through that process yet and have it completed. So I think it would be really wise, just because of the nature of this project, the fact that it's the first time something like this would be being done in Patterson, to have some kind of a partner, almost call it like a mentor agency, involved in helping with the project. I mentioned possibly the Stanislaus County Housing Authority, and I took the liberty a couple months ago of talking to Bill Fagan, who some of you have met or heard of. He's executive director. He said they would be very willing to be involved in this project, and they've done similar things in other parts of the county as well. So that's a local option. I also mentioned Mercy Housing in my report, which I know Mr. McCord is familiar with. They're a real good organization, nonprofit, that has done these community-based sheltering projects and transitional housing projects throughout the country. I said in the staff report that they're based in Southern California. I think that's accurate. I know they have a large office in Orange County that serves all the Southern California area, and I've worked for a couple of cities in the past that have partnered with Mercy Housing to do similar kinds of projects. So there are some options. Those aren't by any means the only two that are out there, but my recommendation would be, especially if we are going to have public funds involved, that we encourage Host to partner up with a larger agency that could help out. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. McCord, who I think has some comments for you. And our recommendation, let me go back to the official recommendation tonight, is that you receive the report from Mr. McCord, you consider their request for funding, and you provide direction to staff regarding the desired level of city funding, if any, and the desired level of city staff participation in this project, property acquisition, property rehabilitation, and then the program development. In other words, what are they actually going to be doing at this facility? So with that, if Mr. McCord wants to come forward.
You may notice I am not Mr. McCord.
Good evening.
I'm Rich Kelly. I am the chairman or chair of the board of Host. And I just wanted to give you a little information about where we are, what we hope to do. There's a couple other people that wanted to say a couple things, and Dennis is our resident expert, so we're going to save him for last so you can ask him questions if you need. This was our third year of providing cold weather services in Patterson. First year at the Teen Center. Then we rented a house on Ivy, and this past winter we have been on Finster. I couldn't find quick access to our first year's data, but last year we served 41 unduplicated individual guests. About half of those found relatively permanent housing. Many were reunited with family members they've been estranged for and were back home. Some people gained employment and were able to get apartments. But we had a pretty good success rate with that. This last winter, we've had 27 unduplicated guests. And out of those, we have 2 that have been placed in what's called transitional housing, but for them, it's going to be permanent housing for the next couple, 3 years, and we'll see where they're able to go from there. We've had people reunited with families. Again, we've had people that got some stability, got employment, and were able to rent a place. We had a couple that was able to take over a lease of a family member's house in Sacramento. So we've had some good success, and we're hoping to continue that. Because, not to bring up the Oleanders again, but that's where many of our guests came from. And the fact that the Oleanders have been cleaned up does not mean the people left Patterson. They're going to be here. They have needs. If we've removed the minimal shelter they had, we have a moral obligation to do something to provide for their needs. And as you know from SBT, we have a legal obligation to take care of that as well. So we're asking for your help and your support. We think that that will be a location that would be effective, a facility with 8 bedrooms and a 2-bedroom apartment that has a lot of flexibility that could be used in a lot of ways to serve this population in our community. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Karen Briones. Not only did I have the privilege of volunteering on the board, but I volunteered at the house as many nights that I could the whole time it was open. And I just wanted to address that we did a lot of work. It wasn't just a place for them to come for a night's sleep and hot meal, which is what we wanted to provide everybody. But we worked hard daily to help them secure housing. We helped them apply for SSI or any county services that were needed by them. We also went to Turlock, Modesto, and visited all their shelters that we could to find out how they run their shelters, what do they do for their people. We made a lot of contacts, and like you said, we helped several people get into transitional housing long term, so those are 3 years, and then they'll hopefully have permanent housing after that. But I just felt such a privilege to not only meet the people that were there, sit with them and have meals with them. Everybody was there for a different reason that brought them there. And our whole goal, the house manager and myself, worked very hard. We wanted everybody to have a place to go when they left the host house. We didn't want them going back to the Oleanders or back to the streets. And that's our goal, hopefully, is to get everybody into housing. So I'll tell you the saddest part for me is we're closing on Saturday, and our house is full. And I worry for those people. We're working very hard. We hope to have at least a place for them to go, whether it's other shelters or with family members on Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Nancy Barbosa, Patterson. I'd like to talk about host from a couple of different perspectives. One is that I work for the school district, and as the word host became more familiar around the community, one of the advantages is that families who were having difficulties said there's another place maybe that we can go so that we don't have to sleep in our cars anymore. And one result of all of this is that we had many, many families who began to contact the district office at Patterson Unify to say, we've got issues and my kids have been sleeping in the car. And so we were able to hook a lot of families up with agencies that they didn't even know existed. So just because host was there, a whole lot of other families were helped. In addition, host has helped to bring a lot of community members together. There are a lot of wonderful giving people in Patterson who don't know quite what to do with their energy. Mm-hmm. And when they found out that there was a place that needed volunteers, that needed meals, that needed laundry services, that needed tutoring services, that needed people just to talk to. People came out of the woodwork to be available to the guests who we served in the evenings. And it was a wonderful testament to the citizens of Patterson that they wanted to give even more than they usually do. So we urge you to continue to let us do this kind of work to help our fellow citizens, because it helps people who didn't even know that we were there, and we were able to serve on the periphery as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin Campbell. I represent my own church, Federated Church, and the churches of Patterson. Just to remember that as a community, we have moral obligation to care for those who are in need of help. And I don't know of any organization that can get as much done for as little money as Host has for the last 3 winters. And that's because you have members of at least 6 congregations who are cooking meals, washing linens, spending hours and hours counseling, spending time listening, driving folks to appointments. This is the way communities are supposed to operate. And I think it's part of the value of those who choose to live in the small towns such as Patterson, that we take care of one another. And I can't see any better investment in our community dollars than to help to work a host.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to be talking now as the commander of American Legion Post 168.
Excuse me, Mr. Anderson.
For a second on this. It's on this.
No, but this is part of the presentation.
Oh,
It's
okay.
not public comment
Oh,
yet.
okay.
So I apologize.
Oh, that's right.
Good evening. I'm Claudia Smith from Patterson. I remember about 6 years ago when I first saw Bradley walking down the street and realizing that we had homeless in Patterson, that we can't treat them and ignore them like most towns. We're a very hospitable community. And I knew that. And I believed in that. And so I've coordinated the preparing the meals for them. But there's so much about sheltering them that I didn't know about. The host committee that you have has organization that I don't have. They have a focus that I don't have. They know how to deal with the grant money that I know nothing about. What I've seen happen, I thought we were just going to have a shelter. We don't. We have had a home, a family for these people who just needed to get out of the cold and the rain and get a normal way of living. Because before they could get showered and get a good night's sleep and get some food in their stomach, they couldn't focus on anything else. And I know that in our economy, there for the grace of God to go I. And what has happened has been incredible. I have so much respect for the committee. I'm just on the committee board. I didn't do all that they were able to do. But they proved that Patterson is a very hospitable, caring community. And I think that what we can do for these people to help pull them off the street so that they can get back into a normal life like we can, it's very important. I'll never forget one of the ladies that came to the park about a year after we had been making meals just on Wednesday and said, I said, oh, did you find a job? I was encouraging that, but all I could do was encourage it. And she said, yes, we found a job in the orchards. However, we had to go late today because we knew we could get food today. We were hungry. And it hit the bottom of my stomach to realize that one day is not enough, 5 days of meals aren't enough. We need to help them get back into a normal life, just like we have, and not take what we have for granted. And so I really encourage you to put support into helping the community of Patterson to take care of the people that are here, because they're part of our community, they're part of our family, and I know that you will consider that in your decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dennis McCord. I live at 417 Sanderling here in Patterson. And about 3 years ago, Pastor Kevin asked me to get involved with HOST, help create an emergency shelter here in town. I have a lot of experience with housing. I've been doing it for about 25 years as a volunteer, and way when I was younger as a paid staff person. So I know this money's available. I know where it is, and we've helped get some of that money here in town and to track it down. In this county right now, there's about $2.6 million a year that comes in from the consortium funds and American Red Cross. There's $2.6 million. That doesn't include emergency service grants, about 7 other state funds that can be used as well. Currently on the west side, we get very, very little of that money. The food bank gets a little bit every year through the ESG grant, Emergency Solution Grant, but there is no shelter money on this side. There, in Modesto, Turlock, those agencies get all the money. They provide services to our Patterson residents if our residents can find them. So HOST works to connect people, to reference those people to those services if they need them, but our guests, we are, when people stay at our house, they're guests. We are taking people right out of the Oleanders. The picture on the front page of the irrigator, they were guests at our house, and they were very proud of the fact that the irrigator had their campsite on the newspaper. We can do a lot. Currently, we're raising, last year we raised about $25,000 in private funds from Patterson, which doesn't sound like a lot of money. But for us, that allows us to be open for 5 months of the year to help people, more than about half, get back into housing, permanent housing. We help people resolve the issues that are preventing them from being housed. So we connect them with year-long rehab programs, 30-day programs, alcohol, drugs. We try and get them into programs that'll, when they're strong enough, to resolve their issues. In some cases, we have people who are just down on their luck. They can't get a job. They're living in their car. We stabilize them, give them an address and a phone number so they can get a job and move on with their lives. Patterson, many communities, I think I've inundated you with emails with hundreds and hundreds of pages of information for you to read about what other communities in California are doing and how they're funding these. Right now, all the HOST is asking for is a permanent site. 3 years ago, when we started looking, we went through the entire light industrial area. We got a number of courtesy inspections, and all of the properties were deemed not to be usable. Then the city allowed us to go out to commercial, and we had a relationship with the Center for Human Services, and we moved into the teen center. That year, the city changed the rules so we could not be at the teen center, but we could be in a residential neighborhood. Now we're changing the rules again. Housing is going to be, with Project X and all of the development that's going on, housing is going to get very, very thin. It's going to be difficult for Patterson, for us to rent a house. There'll be, almost all these houses are going to be rented within a couple of years. We need a permanent site. Foothill Manor is actually an excellent site for it. With the building inspection, there's 2 bedrooms that are separated from the other 8. Those 2 bedrooms we won't be able to use because of accessible issues for guests. But the 8 bedrooms are very large. We could easily house up to 16 people. The major issues that the building inspector quoted were the doors need to be increased to 3 feet wide, a couple bathrooms need to be fixed, power boxes need to be moved up 2 inches, Those were the major issues. There was some leveling that needed to happen on the front and back door, but pretty minor leveling so that to meet the 2% standard for the new ADA standards. It's not that much money. I believe that we can do it for the $50,000. The realtor, one of our realtors here, and she can answer any other questions, but they did agree to sell us the property for $150,000, and we guesstimated $50,000 in repairs. I did have a general contractor come take a look, and there's some windows that need to be repaired, some ceiling tiles, some other issues that need to be resolved. And for about $50,000, we can probably get that all done, or get enough more rooms open than we currently have. So we can work with the city to do that, and we'll have 6 or 7 months before next winter season. We are asking the city to help us with $200,000. If you would give us $200,000 from the in lieu funds or from the general fund, then we would be able to apply in September for consortium funds. That's the $2.2 million. It's about $700,000 a year that comes available for new projects. With $100,000, we could actually get $333,000 in operating funds, which would operate it for 3 years, which would actually allow us to staff up more, which is what some of the city staff would like us to do. We do have a lot of volunteers that are volunteering. We have thousands of hours of volunteers who are working at the shelter, who are doing case management, who are driving people to their appointments and helping them get into housing. We would be able to help more people if the city, if you would be able to help us with this property. Many cities provide the property, a permanent site, for the shelter. We're asking the city of Patterson if you would be willing to help us with a permanent shelter, and if you would give us that money, then we would be able to leverage it to bring in additional funds into Patterson, hire additional people, and meet the regulations that are required. If you read what we handed out, there's a lot of state funds that are based upon this. There's a lot of issues. As far as getting an agency to help us, we do attend the consortium. We do have a relationship with CHS. Actually, they're going to be coming and helping to do some of our board training and staff training. We're working on an MOU with them to kind of move forward with that process because they are a larger agency. We currently operate under the Federated Church. We do have our own incorporation. The only thing that we're in the process of getting our 501c3, getting that approved. But so that everyone's fine, we operate under the Federated, but we have a separate checkbook, separate board. We operate separately. We do, I know Michelle very well, who works for the Director of Housing. We do go to all the consortium meetings so that if HOST is involved in a project in Patterson, we are eligible for consortium funds. You have to attend at least 6 meetings a year. We've been attending for 3 years. I go regularly so that we're represented. We have not been funded, and the primary reason that we have not been funded is because we do not have a permanent site. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them at this time.
Okay. Bring it back to council. Any questions of Mr. McCord?
Well,
Organization.
Yeah, first of all, I want to congratulate you on what you've done so far for the community and applaud your efforts moving forward. This is a wonderful way to help the people in the community who need it, and thank you for that. And thank you for the work that you've done. And it's, like you were saying, Claudia, it's bringing people together and working together. I know my daughter has helped to make peanut butter sandwiches, and it's a great way to bring the children of the community together and appreciate what they have and reach out and bring a community together. So I appreciate that. Besides the primary goal of taking care of those who are less fortunate. Couple just quick questions. I know in your background here you had, Claudia, you were talking about families, and then on here it says we house guests from 18 years of age to senior citizens. So just to clarify, it will just be people, adults, 18 years and older, or is it going to be families? Are you changing that, or is that what, can you speak to that?
Okay, so currently because we rent a 3-bedroom house,
Right.
we have limited it to adults who are 18 and older. What we're asking for is that this shelter would be used for people with extremely low income. That's a special class of affordable housing, which is extremely difficult for the city of Patterson or any developer to meet. We are currently tasked with our RHNA numbers is to develop 80 of those units over the next 5 years, and we're actually we have another 2 years before we're supposed to have those done. So we would like to leave it to the board to figure out how they could do that, whether we turn that into a family shelter or adult shelter. As the needs of Patterson grow and change, we'd like to be able to leave that to the board to determine what's the best way to meet that criteria.
Okay, so for now, it would be 18 and up.
That's who we service right now.
Okay, I'm just clarifying, and I know we had talked about families, so I just wanted to,
And there are a
which is
number-
great, and I know that sometimes when you find those families, such as you did with the school, you're able to reach out and connect them with other agencies because this agency was in effect, or because your program was in effect.
And we had 3 actually families that came to us directly. We have put families up in hotels for several nights as we work to get them to other agencies. They come to other people, they stay in people's homes, and I get called and I go interview families with the person there so they understand what they're getting into. I work with those people. Our citizens are very generous, but they may not be completely safe. So I want to make sure they understand what they're getting into.
Okay, good point. And you mentioned you're working on your 501c3, and when do you anticipate getting that?
We are almost ready to file. I have one last piece of paperwork I have to get together. All the rest of it's together. The hard part's done. Now we just have the easy part, which is why we operate under the Federateds. It takes about 29. We have 29 months from the date of incorporation, which is we still have a few months left before we have to file.
Okay. So anticipated date of it should be?
Probably March or April.
Okay,
Yeah, we're very close. It's just a matter of getting through the season where I have more time.
great. Just to get a date there. I'll bring it back to other council members. I'm sure I may have a couple more.
Well, I just wanted to have a follow-up question about the 501c3. So once you put in the paperwork, I was just wondering how long it is after that?
That's up to the IRS. I've done a number of these in the past.
Is it like 2 months, 5 months, a year? I was just wondering if you heard.
Yes, and all of the above,
Okay.
which is why we operate under the Federateds,
Sure.
because we're protected that way.
Okay.
Everyone's protected as we're going through. It's very common for 501c3, one to be birthed from another one. That way, all the donors are protected.
Okay. And then the next question is actually for our city manager. I noticed in the staff report that, and also through the presentation, that they submitted a plan development. Specifically, was everything in the plan development that staff would need in order to feel comfortable about every little contingency about that building, so that there's no surprises, so that the council can make an informed decision?
Yeah. I'm actually going to punt on that to our deputy city attorney. He's been working closely with the city planner on the specifics of that submittal.
Yeah, I think that you're referring to the current application that's being processed. So as it relates to that application, and given the fact that we're so close to closing, we're looking at developing it in coordination with the new ordinance, which would allow where, emergency shelters should be. So it wouldn't make much point to process an application when we've got till Saturday when the property is going to be in use. So that's pretty much the reason why it hasn't been processed. There were issues that were identified, but we never made it to a point that, other than initial dialogue, basically, given the time frame we were working with.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. White, you're talking about the certification for the housing element? Is that, or what are you talking
I was
about?
actually talking about their
application.
Their application for the house that they're currently using.
Okay, all right. I have a question for Chief Hall. Chief Hall, were there major concerns, or what were your concerns, if any, in terms of that courtesy walkthrough?
We did, in fact, do a courtesy walkthrough with Mr. McCord. From a life safety standpoint, if we were determining where a shelter should be, that would be a good building to have it in. It's a fully sprinklered building, which means it's protected by automatic fire sprinklers. It has an Ansel hood system in the kitchen area. Both of those components, as I discussed with Mr. McCord, do need to be brought up to current service levels. And that's a requirement of any business or any building in the city, let alone the county that has a sprinklered facility. The other issues from the life safety standpoint are relatively minor. Fire extinguishers need to be installed, a Knox box entry system for the fire department. I think we looked at some emergency lighting that needs to be fixed, and then the smoke detectors within each of the bedrooms needed to be upgraded or serviced. So in a nutshell, from a life safety standpoint, that would be a relatively good building for the project.
Okay, thank you. No more questions at this time. Any other for council? Okay, thank you, Mr. McCord. I'll go ahead and open it up to anybody in the public wishing to make a comment, and then we'll bring it back to council for any further questions and/or comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike Anderson, Patterson, California. I'd like to speak as the commander of American Legion 168, Patterson, California. The Oleanders, there was people parked there that were veterans. And whatever their stories are, they came back from nightmares that we couldn't imagine in our lifetimes. Until you see a veteran that's been in combat, as my brother has, it's like night and day. I was in the Republic of South Korea while he was in the Republic of South Vietnam. He saw things that he won't speak about today. It's a kind of like a brotherhood, and they need places like this. I've been to that building at times. I've done volunteer work there. The community knows that I've done there. I come during the night of December, so you know what I do when I go there. I'm playing a just different role. The only thing I would have to say is this, that maybe we could also work, my organization, with my members' support, with HOST, for maybe if they have veterans over there with their families, one day out, we could sponsor GI Day down, what they call it, Mayor. You know when they get veterans together and get haircuts, the community can come into that. As the chief said, it's a great, safe area for like doing things. You know, has sprinklers and everything for a down day for veterans. So, if this goes forward, I'd like to say that, as far as I can say, that American Legion Post 168 would try to work with HOST. As you know, we work with the community and we work with veterans. I'd like to put out an invitation now to HOST. If you have any veterans over there that need to get in touch with us and talk to us on a one-on-one basis, we have 8 new members who are Iraqi and Afghanistan veterans. We have 2 women that have served in that time period now. They have different issues, so if there's a lady that comes out through the night, she has kids and she's a military veteran, get in touch with me 24/7. Dennis knows where I live. There's money, like Dennis says, out there, and we're reaching out for it, but it's more of a heart thing. I used to see this man come by on the stroller, and it was heartbreaking. He had issues, and a lot of them that do come to these places have issues, but I know that HOST will make restrictions. They will be under a new thing of doctrine when they get there, like rules, like Dennis says, to maybe alleviate the community. You know, when any one of us take a trip to San Francisco, we see nightmares on the streets of the city, and it's very awakening. I've walked down the street and I've seen people walk over people that have been laid out in the street. I always call an ambulance or call somebody for them. Remember, and I don't want to bring religion because I don't bring religion into city government, but as compassionate human beings, we have to put our differences aside. We are a very blessed nation, and we should show it daily to our undeserving that have it harder than us. So I'd like to say that I would give my support, my families in Patterson and Rockland. I've talked to them about this. We would support this 100%. Thank you.
Thank you. So, the member of the public wishing to make a comment.
I just feel compelled to say something after hearing from the participants from HOST, having taken a look at that same building as the pastor of Lighthouse, wanting to service the citizens and community of Patterson. I really would like to encourage the city council to support HOST in their goals and to support them financially. I do understand that oftentimes, you know, that might open the city up and city officials up to possibly some ridicule when it comes to giving city monies when we're dealing with limited funds citywide. But in agreement with the host directors, there is a moral issue at stake, and we do have to be, we are our brother's keepers. If Patterson doesn't respond to the need, then who can we look to respond to the need? And I just would like to encourage you to put some dollars there. And speaking as the senior pastor of Lighthouse, I make a commitment to working with Host in the future to serve the citizens of Patterson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any member of the public wishing to make a comment?
Hello, my name is Vivian Ratliff, and I stay at 304 Berlin Way. I and my husband have been volunteering with Host just one day a month for the 3 years since they have been open. And the thing that Host has helped us with is that my husband had a heart attack, and when he started volunteering for Host, it's like it just brought him out of that situation. So it's like it's really been a blessing to our family because he's able to volunteer. And it has a more special meaning because he has a brother that has a mental problem, and he goes into them homes and then he ends up being homeless. But there are people that are out there that helps him, just like what Host is doing. And I have a cousin that's like that, and we were able to get him into a home like that and get him help. So a lot of people, if you don't have anybody in your family with that type of problem, or that's been homeless, really don't understand how important, it is. And anybody that wants to volunteer, they'll work you. They'll find a spot for you, And all you have to do it is just one day a month. But we enjoy it, working with them just that one day a month, and my husband really gets excited about it. So I just hope that you guys would, consider giving them the money for this, because it is a great need, and we can't hide the fact that we do have homeless people in our community, and some of them do have mental problems too. And the Host has been great in finding the places to put them and the locations and stuff. So this would really be an asset to our community that maybe other people in other communities will look at Patterson and then do one for their homeless area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian.
Is there any other member of the public wishing to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, hearing none, I'll go ahead and bring it back to council. Any other further questions and/or comments?
Well, I wanted to start. I had a number of comments and questions and concerns. A number of them have been answered and addressed, and I appreciate that. I first want to say, just to get it out there, that I'm in full support of this project. It should come as no surprise that anyone aware of their surroundings, that in their city, like many others, that we share continuing challenges with those who are homeless or financially destitute. And I think a project such as this, if done right, and if everything is put into place as it should be, will certainly help. Nothing is going to be a panacea for a continuing problem that is unfortunately always going to continue. But, as they always say, with difficult problems, baby steps. And Host has taken a lot of, great baby steps, and this is another large, important, baby step. I guess any concern I have, I trust the management administration within City Hall, that being Ron Butler and his staff, to make sure that every bit of information that we need, that is needed, is obtained so that we can make an informed decision, and that comes from the legal, financial, and risk management aspects. If I know there are some concerns about money coming from the general fund, for this project, but if it can be obtained and utilized through housing, I don't see any problem with it. I did want to add that, get getting off the ground. I want to make sure that the council also receives input from the citizens that live around there, because they live there first, and it's important to obtain community buy-in from them so that everyone is on board with this and that there's no rife or conflict.
Councilmember Novelli?
As I stated, I think it's important that we move forward, that we do take care of the destitute within our community. I can't imagine having to live like that, and it's part of our obligation, I believe, as a council, to help take care of that. And it's wonderful that we have such an amazing community to pull together to do that. With that said, we've got a lot of work to get done as far as staff, as far as the legal end, the real estate end, and so I would like to, I request that staff compile a report and for further analysis. Okay.
As far as what?
Well, as far as the legal implications of it, as far as
The fiscal.
the fiscal, who is going to have what responsibility along the way. If a particular problem happens, such as maintenance, who's going to handle the maintenance problems? Because now that will be, requiring more, not only the financial commitment from the city to put forward, the 200,000, or is there going to be other requirement from the city for that? So I would just like a report from that. I am all in favor of this, but I do think that we need to have a little bit more detail in-house.
With the fiscal analysis, if I may add, Councilmember Novelli, that especially with the specific construction of the house, that either an engineer or a full inspection, an itemized inspection of any problem that may, that come up, is actually on paper, so that there's really no surprises. And of course, there's always going to be a contingency aspect, and that financial asterisk has to be included in that. But in order for us to make an informed decision, I think something like that, like with any type of project, industrial, commercial, residential, has to be put on paper. So,
Right. I think we just need to dot the i's and cross the t's, and yes. Okay, just a moment. Do we have any more council comments?
Yeah.
And then we'll open it up to you again, Mr. McCord, if you just give us a moment.
Clarification. I would just like to simply say that this last December, it was probably about a couple weeks before Christmas, around that time, I got a call. It said, Mayor, I see this family living in their car, and some people in the community may have seen the small SUV covered in blankets. And this particular resident said, what can we do? I went back there, and they just asked for water, but I feel compelled to do something. And she went back over there, and they were no longer there. The next day, I kind of drove around looking for this particular SUV that was described to me and couldn't find it. Well, I think Mr. McCorder, one of the host presenters, said that some people have invited people into their home temporarily, and that's just what this lady and her husband did. And she called me. She said, I found them. Well, they had a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old living in the car. And I have to tell you, because of the work of host, and I just had a chance to talk to Dennis, and between 4 or 5 individuals were able to help them, get them some gas. It was a challenge, and I think Claudia had mentioned about trying to stabilize an individual, let alone a family, who later on we found out has really been trekking through the state for, or at least the northern part of the state, for a couple of years. And so there's a lot of work to be done, especially when little ones are involved. So I definitely know that the need is out there, not only oleanders, but people who may be passing through and break down. I know in the past there's been a young family who's, I think the woman was pregnant as well, their car broke down and trying to build that. I know Pastor Campbell had mentioned, and others know that our community is very giving. I think that when there comes to a need of being addressed, this community is number one. And I think that we, aside from, and I really don't want to downplay, there's compassion, there's a moral obligation that was stated, building capacity in somebody's life. This is an opportunity. Case management is not easy, and that's something that people are willing to volunteer to do to help build capacity in a person and a family. But really looking at what we can do, I would like to get a little creative if we could. I think that whatever the need is, my concern being trying to be fiscally responsible is what can we do to not always go to the general fund? And I'd like to look at other untapped resources. We just agreed as a council not too long ago, I know Chief Hughes had mentioned it, using our opportunity to apply for grants. I know some of those are challenging, but I think we need to look at those opportunities to bring in additional revenue that will speak to some of those capacity building opportunities to help host and other organizations in our community. I'm definitely in favor of this. I don't know, and we heard a presentation of what some of the work our staff has done in terms of the oleanders and how much money was saved coming under budget. Mr. Butler, and we don't need an answer tonight, but is that something that our staff can do to save some cost or exchange some costs? I don't know if it would just be a wash at the end with any liability concerns. It was good to hear from Chief Haw, and I'm sure Mr. Swanson had a thorough report. I don't want to put Chief Hughes on the spot, but I'm going to ask, is there any concerns that you might have, Chief?
Just some of the same concerns that I expressed before as far as calls for service, and again, they were very minimal. So it's just the drug use and some of the issues that we did have, and even the Patterson irrigator and Jonathan and his laptop being stolen. So it's some of those issues, but again, I think that it's something that we could work with them to help reduce some of those problems. So.
And I don't know if we have community members out there, I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, but that would be willing to, and I just want to put it out there with liability as a concern, to donate money, to donate labor, to donate materials, and rehabilitating. I think that this is a community effort. This is not something just like law enforcement and reducing crime. We can't just leave it up to law enforcement to do. We as a community, Pastor Richardson, I'm happy to hear you and Mr. Anderson. Also, we're compelled to say, we're going to chip in whatever way we can. And I think that that's kind of where we're at. I concur with my colleagues that obviously we need to look at the legalities and make sure that that's taken care of, making sure that everybody shares that responsibility. But in the end, that we all agree to pull in one direction. So I appreciate the dialogue, appreciate the public's participation. Are there any other concerns that maybe the council is not aware of from Mr. White, your perspective, or Mr. Butler's perspective?
I think the biggest concern is kind of is getting a better idea, one, of how they plan on using the property going forward. Because how the property is used will dictate which funds might be eligible to be used outside of general funds. So, in order to move forward and know what our options are, we'll have to get a better idea of how they, plan on doing it. One of the challenges, for instance, in some of the funds is isn't almost too short-term of housing in order to be able to use, for instance, some of our, in lieu, affordable housing in lieu funds. Those are issues that we can work through. The other way is the other concern is the way in which we, if we were to move forward, the way in which we would be granting money, making sure that that's done properly, number one, and then also making sure that that with that the city doesn't expose itself to liability. So just as the donors get protected by going through the corporation, we want to make sure that the city doesn't take on any kind of liability. I think the third issue is, because of the fact that Host is a younger organization, is issues of what happens when you potentially give up to $200,000 of public funds. What happens if the organization, if the folks lose interest, and what happens to the building? What happens if folks want to change the use, things of that nature? So those are all issues that I think that we need to work through. Nothing that's insurmountable, but just there's going to have to be clarity, and there'll probably have to be some dialogue going back and forth to be able to get to a point where we can make a firm recommendation. Okay.
It may be kind of an elephant in the room, but if money is given, say from the housing, who actually owns the deed to the property? And that was one of my questions. Also, in relation to the grants that Mayor Molina was talking about, right now, it's probably going to have to come from the housing. I know you are working on your 501c3. I wish you the best. I hope for an expedient and speedy answer from the IRS. And I know, once that's in place, you'll do even, more wonderful things. But I think in the meantime, the city, if we choose to do so, we'll have to step in. Touching upon Attorney White, I think, as long as they're satisfied, all the fiscal analyses, the legal analyses, the construction safety, and all that is, all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, then I think we can go ahead. But that's, we have a kind of a difficult decision to make sure that everything's buttoned up, regardless of the social, environmental, religious aspect. It's a difficult decision we have to employ onto every type of decision, big, middle, big, medium, or small.
Any other comments? Okay. So at this point, the council's pleasure in terms of direction. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. McCord.
It was your cough.
Yeah.
I just wanted to address a few things real quick. So a lot of people brought up the moral responsibility. We also have a legal responsibility to do this. The city of Patterson is required to do this by law. There are anti-NIMBY statutes. So if this is the by right zone.
Mr. McCord, just for the public, NIMBY.
Not in my backyard.
Thank you.
We have done a lot of research. We operate under the Federated's 501c3, so the city is protected. We're asking for either a loan or a gift of the money. The gift is better because then we can actually apply for grants this fall and would have a high opportunity to get that money. We would, I think we've been meeting with the city since November to try and get to a recommendation from city staff. And I do appreciate that you would like to have an architect or an engineer dot the I and cross the T's. And I think if the city council was to provide funds for the city staff to do that, or the authorization for them to spend money to do that, that would be a big help. The property owner would like to, they've been waiting since November for this to be brought before the city council. Because they're really giving us a good deal on the property. They're really looking for, does the city council want to do this? Are they willing to do this? What's the criteria for the city council to do this? Are they looking to give, would they want to do this with a loan? Would they want to do this with a gift? And here are the considerations. But they're kind of looking for a time frame. So if it would be at all possible to give the city the city staff some direction as to, here's some money to hire an architect and do the review, not just a courtesy review, but a full-blown review. And we would be willing to consider this out of the in lieu funds if at all possible. But other councils from other cities have actually directed that even if you don't have an affordable housing trust fund or an in lieu fund, then by law, it's the general fund. And we're happy to get you any advice or consultation with attorneys you'd like to talk about that. I think I addressed all the issues I heard that I really needed to, but if there's one I missed, please tell me and I'll be happy to. As Rod will tell you, I can talk for hours on this.
Any questions for Mr. McCord?
Just one other point for clarification. I don't know if Rhonda can clarify. You had talked, in one quote here, you talked about the property being $200,000, and then you had mentioned it being going down to $150,000, and then on the sheet of paper, it states a higher dollar value. So just for clarification, the price of the property is?
$50,000.
That we have a written agreement at $150,000. We've asked for another $50,000 to make repairs, which is, we believe we can do everything the city wants for that $50,000. They were initially listed at like $239,900. But Rhonda likes me, so she gave us a good deal.
Thank you, Rhonda.
And Council, if I could just for a second,
Sure,
I just
Mr.
wanted
White.
to clarify one point. And under SB2, the council's responsibility is to zone for it. It's important that you understand that there's not an obligation that you actually buy a building. So the obligation is to zone for it, to make it allowable. I just feel in complete disclosure, there's not an actual obligation to pay for it. It doesn't mean you can't. It just means that that's not your obligation.
You're saying we don't have a legal obligation to buy a building?
To buy a building
Correct.
and provide.
But we have a legal obligation
to zone for it. You can't just zone it out. Yeah.
Well, comment for the now is, if 2 weeks is not really going to, break, the progress of this, I'd like to have a little more analysis from the staff to make sure that everything is done before we actually give the go-ahead for any monies. So.
For any what monies? Is that what you said?
Correct.
Well, I want to be a little bit specific for staff. I mean, that we have $200,000 that's being requested of us, $150,000 for the property acquisition and $50,000 for property rehabilitation. There was a funding question at what level, city staff participation, what level as far as property acquisition and property rehabilitation. If we want the full analysis on the full amount, I'd like to give staff direction to really flesh out any issues that we need answered for the April 3rd meeting at the 200 asking for property acquisition and property rehabilitation. And as far as staff participation is to provide that expertise on moving forward and bring it back with a more detailed recommendation for our April 3rd meeting. That's the 2 weeks you were talking about? Correct.
At the least. So.
I think from staff's perspective and legal counsel's perspective, and we can maybe get a sense of from Dennis and or Rhonda, could we get a 30-day from tonight? So April 17th would actually be a little bit less than 30 days. But, if that doesn't completely mess up the real estate transaction, that buys us a little bit more time to do the kind of thorough analysis that I
Sure.
think you're asking for.
And I think any amount of time is justified to make sure that our...
I heard 2 weeks from Councilmember Farina, so I was trying to make a deal on his behalf.
Yeah.
Right, sure.
Right.
And if I could just add, I mean, one of the main reasons is one of the bigger challenges that we're going to have is we have to figure out what funds are eligible to possibly do this. And we're going to have to go through basically every fund and have a dialogue with the applicants to basically say, okay, are you going to offer this, this, and this? And if you're not, are you willing to tweak your program to potentially be able to offer those things so that these funds might be available? I think the one that we're all probably looking for and the one that's probably most obvious is the in lieu fees. So.
Okay. Any questions or comments from Rhonda or Dennis?
I think Rhonda said she can't answer about the 30 days. She doesn't. We're actually...
Can we have you come to the mic? I'm sorry.
So Rhonda said she can't answer on the 30 days. We're actually past our contingency because by that time we're going to be over 5 months of waiting at this point because not a lot was done earlier. We do have our CRLA is here, the California Rural League Association is here. If they wanted to, I think they've been trying to get hold of Tom Hallen, and I think Doug is here. They can talk about this more because I think there's more legal responsibility than you're required. You're not required to buy a building. You are required to do affordable housing.
Yes. Yeah, we agree on that. And I'm working with CRLA on another case, so we'll have plenty of dialogue, so.
Right.
And if we can't expedite, what I can say is at least from legal's perspective, if there's a way for us to expedite it and the conversations go quickly, then, it's possible that I'll contact the city manager and say, at least from our perspective, we're ready for April 3rd, but that's a very, very quick time frame to make sure that we, because we'll have to probably consult risk management and what we do and so on. And I just want to make sure that we can actually meet your expectations and not be set up for failure.
Sure.
Yeah.
And Host has been very flexible on this. We're trying to leave this as open so that it's a community shelter, that the community can help use it for the resources that we need it used for our community. So the more flexibility we have on doing what our community needs is what we'd like. What we don't want to say is you got to have, it's only for eligible for 60-year-old veterans. When they're 61, they're going to move somewhere else. We don't want to get so tight that it's not used the way we want it to be. But for our community, we'd like it to be used. So if we can do, sooner is better. They've been very generous in going past our contingency. We thought we could get this done in like 90 to 120 days, that we could get some decision. We're now up to about 5 months. And so the sooner the better. We're very flexible. We're just waiting for the city to say, hey, this is what will work.
Well, I think as far as legal, and I understand, again, I know Councilmember Farina wanted a couple weeks. Understandably, it may happen then, may happen a little bit later. We'll try to get that done as soon as possible. But I think more importantly, or just as importantly, I should say, my colleagues and I think, are in support as long as everything that we have to do on behalf of the city and our administration with Rod Butler overseeing that, and Mr. White and Mr. Hallinan are doing what they need to do on their end. Any questions and answers and dialogue, and I would concur with Mr. Farina, Councilmember Farina, is that there's full implicit trust in our staff to make sure that happens.
Yep. I wanted to add a comment among the staff, among the council, that another concern may come up, especially from the public, that if it is a loan, we need to have some type of plan, a fiscal, accountability model that kind of shows how it's going to be paid back. Like grants, the great thing about the bad thing about grants is that there's no guarantee, despite all the work that goes into them. If we don't get a grant within 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, what is the alternative for paying that loan back, and what's the time frame? So I think those are questions that also need to be addressed.
I think regardless of loan or gift, I think that there needs to be that accountability and some type of reporting back. I know that we talked about, what are some of the unduplicated numbers. I think it's important to build some kind of evaluation into this as well. I think it's important, especially public monies, regardless of how it's used, there needs to be that evaluation and accountability on the community's investment. So I don't know if we needed a further direction, Mr. Butler.
No, I think we've got enough to move forward. It'll be a combination of Mr. White and his team, and then city staff in putting that report together. And of course, obviously, we'll be asking a lot of questions and interacting a lot with hosts as well.
Right. Basically, just from my perspective, I just want to see some of the options, that we were talking about fiscally, how we can do it, what funds it would come from. Again, wanting to move forward, and I wish we could move forward with it tonight. And please understand that this is a big decision for the council in times of a budget shortfall. And I know that we look good compared to a lot of the other cities. Please understand this is the first time that it's come before council. So we want to make the decisions and we want to do it right. And within the city, and asking for 30 days is pretty quick. So if you could please understand that. And I wish it had come before us sooner. But tonight is the first night. So with that, directing staff to come back within 30 days, giving everything else that they have to do too. I think that's a reasonable request. Okay.
Okay. All right with that?